You have to turn sideways just to get through the door. The little office on School Street is so packed you can smell it. Cigar smoke, sweat, wet dollar bills. Men shove past each other, waving fistfuls of cash over the crowd, begging a clerk to take their money before it's too late. And in the middle of it all, calm, in a spotless white suit, a small man just smiles and takes every dollar they can hand him. His name is Charles Ponzi, and the offer is simple. Give him $1,000, and in 45 days he hands you back $1,500. 50% in 6 weeks. No stocks, no questions. And for one incredible summer, he actually pays. By August, he's pulling in close to $1 million a day, and the line to reach him wraps around the block and down the stairs. Police are called, not to arrest him, but to hold back the crowd fighting to hand him their savings. Then it's over. When the auditors finally crack open his safe, they find a mountain of promises and about $61 in real money. But the machine he built in that crowded little room will still be running 100 years later, under new names, in new cities, for 1,000 times the cash. Here's the strange part. Ponzi wasn't lying about the math being possible. For about a week, it actually was. Stay with me, because the moment that door first opened is the moment the whole thing was already dead, and almost no one in that line could hear the clock ticking. This is the story of the man whose name became a crime. I dig up one forgotten money story like this every single week. If that's your kind of history, subscribe now, and come with me to School Street, Boston, 1920. Before he was a verb, he was a nobody. Carlo Ponzi stepped off a ship in Boston Harbor in November of 1903, by his own telling. And the telling is important because Ponzi told his own story beautifully. He arrived with $2.50 in his pocket. He'd had more when the voyage began. He'd lost the rest at the card tables on the way over. Hold on to that image. A young man who crosses an ocean to start a new life and gambles away the stake before he even lands. That's the whole man, right there at the dock. For the next 15 years, he was a drifter with good manners and bad luck. He waited tables until he was fired for shortchanging customers. He drifted up to Montreal and took a job at a bank that catered to Italian immigrants, a bank that was, itself, quietly paying old depositors with new deposits, robbing tomorrow to cover yesterday. When it collapsed, Ponzi was left broke in a foreign country. He forged a check, got caught, and spent 3 years in a Canadian prison. Then a stint in an American one for smuggling immigrants across the border. So by 1919, here is Charles Ponzi's resume. 2 convictions, no money, no prospects, and a talent. A real, genuine talent for making people feel good about handing him things. He was 37 years old. He'd been in America for 16 years. And he had, by any honest measure, absolutely nothing to show for it. And then a letter arrived from Spain. Just a routine business letter. But tucked inside, it was a small slip of paper most people would have thrown away without a second glance. Ponzi didn't throw it away. Ponzi looked at it, and for the first time in his life, he saw a door. The slip of paper was called an international reply coupon. It's one of the most boring objects ever invented, so stay with me, because this boring little coupon is the seed of everything. Back then, if you wrote a letter to someone in another country and wanted to pay for their reply, you couldn't just mail them American stamps. American stamps are no good in Spain. So the world's postal services agreed on a fix. You'd buy this coupon in your country, mail it abroad, and the person on the other end could swap it for stamps of their own. A coupon for a stamp. Utterly forgettable. Except Ponzi noticed something. The coupons had one fixed price everywhere, but currencies did not. After the First World War, money in Europe had collapsed, and a coupon that cost the equivalent of 1 American cent in Italy or Spain could be exchanged, in the United States, for stamps worth 5 or 6 cents. Buy for 1, redeem for 6. Legally, in the open. Sit with how good that sounds for a second, because everyone in this story sat with it too. It isn't a con. It isn't a lie. It is a real gap between a fixed price and a floating currency. The kind of thing a clever person might genuinely spot and exploit. Ponzi had, at last, found something true. He gave it a grand name. The Securities Exchange Company rented a small office on School Street in the heart of Boston and started telling people he could turn their money into more money through the magic of postal coupons. And the promise he attached to it was the part nobody could resist. Not 5% a year, like the savings bank down the street. 50%. In 45 days. Double your money in 90. There was just one problem with the idea. And it's not the problem you'd expect. It wasn't that the coupon trick was fake. It was that it was real. Because the moment Ponzi tried to actually do it, at the scale he was promising, the whole beautiful idea fell apart in his hands. Let's take Ponzi at his word for a moment. Let's pretend he really intended to buy coupons, ship them, redeem them, and pay you your 50% out of the profit. Here's the problem with that number. To back the money that poured into that little office on School Street, Ponzi would have needed to be buying and redeeming somewhere around 160 million postal coupons. 160 million. Do you know how many international reply coupons existed in the entire world at that moment? Around 27,000. Stop and let those two numbers stand next to each other, because this single image is the whole episode. He needed 160 million of a thing the planet had made 27,000 of. It's not a shortfall. It's not, he was a little short. It's like promising to pay everyone in gold from a mine that produces gravel. And even the 27,000 that did exist were useless to him. A coupon is a slip of paper worth a few cents. To move real money, you'd have to physically buy them by the trainload in Europe, ship them across the Atlantic, haul them to a post office, and trade each one, by hand, for a nickel's worth of stamps. Stamps you then somehow have to turn back into cash. The paperwork alone would eat any profit alive. The arbitrage was real. It just couldn't carry more than pocket change. So the 50% was never coming from coupons. It never could. Which raises the only question that matters. If the money wasn't coming from the idea, where was it coming from? The answer was standing right outside his door, in a line that got longer every single day. And here's the part that still unsettles me a century later. For a while, Ponzi didn't need to lie about the returns at all, because he really was paying them. Here is the trick, and it is so simple it's almost insulting. Say I hand Ponzi $1,000 in June, and he promises me $1,500 in August. When August comes, he doesn't sell a single coupon. He just takes $1,000 from someone who walked in that morning and hands it to me. I get my $1,500. I'm thrilled. I tell everyone I know. That's it. That's the entire engine. He isn't investing your money. He's paying you with the next person's money and paying the next person with the person after that. The money never grows. It just moves from the newest hand to the oldest. And for a few intoxicating months, it works. Because in the summer of 1920, the line never stopped growing. Word tore through Boston. A shoeshiner told a cop. The cop told his sergeant. Widows brought their savings. Police officers invested their own pay. People mortgaged their homes and stood in line to hand Ponzi the money. At the peak, in July, cash was coming in at something close to $1 million a day. And remember, this is 1920, when a good yearly wage might be a couple $1,000s. Ponzi bought a mansion in the suburbs with air conditioning and a heated pool. He bought a controlling stake in a Boston bank. He rode through the city, and people cheered him from the sidewalk. A penniless ex-convict had become, in about 6 months, the most beloved man in Boston. You could stand on School Street that July and watch a crowd of thousands, waving fistfuls of dollars, begging a man to take their money. Every single one of them was a beat in a clock that was already ticking toward zero. They just couldn't hear it. But one newspaper editor could. And he was about to do the two most dangerous things you can do to a man like Ponzi. First, believe him. Then, check. On July 24th, 1920, the Boston Post put Charles Ponzi on its front page. And the story was glowing. It described the returns, the crowds, the rags-to-riches immigrant who'd cracked the code. It was, essentially, free advertising on the front page of the biggest paper in New England. The effect was instant and brutal. The very next day, the crowds on School Street were bigger than ever. The newspaper meant to describe the fire had poured gasoline on it. But inside that same newspaper, a small doubt was hardening into a question. If this man is earning 50% every 45 days on tens of millions of dollars, where, physically, are the coupons? A skeptical financial voice pointed out that the volume of coupons required simply did not exist in the world. So the Post did the thing that separates journalism from stenography. It stopped repeating what Ponzi said and started checking it. Within 2 days, the paper's tone flipped. It began asking, in print, the questions the crowd never asked. The district attorney leaned on Ponzi to stop taking money while auditors looked at his books. And then came the strangest betrayal of all. Ponzi, in his confidence, had hired a publicist, a man named William McMasters, to help manage his image. But McMasters got a look at the actual books, and what he saw horrified him. He went to the Boston Post, and in early August he told its readers the truth in 5 words that ended the man who hired him. Charles Ponzi, he wrote, was hopelessly insolvent. A financial idiot. The publicist Ponzi paid to sell him had just told the whole city he was broke, and the line outside School Street, which had only ever grown, for the first time, began to move the other way. When people stop giving a Ponzi scheme money and start asking for it back, the machine has seconds to live. Because there is no reserve, there is no vault of coupons. There is only the next person in line, and the line just reversed. To his credit as a showman, Ponzi stayed calm. As the first nervous investors came to withdraw, he paid them, cheerfully, in full, coffee and donuts for the crowd. Every dollar he handed back was a dollar that made 10 other people decide their money was safe and go home. He was buying time with the only currency he had left, other people's faith. But faith was draining faster than he could refill it. On August 9th, regulators found that Ponzi's account at the bank he'd bought was massively overdrawn. And on August 11th, the Boston Post landed the final blow. It dug up his past and printed it. The forgery, the prison time in Montreal, the mugshot. The beloved genius of School Street was an ex-convict who had been paying old investors with new ones his entire adult life. On August 12, 1920, it was over. Ponzi surrendered to federal authorities. Then the auditors went in. They opened the books, they opened the safe, and they went looking for the fortune, the coupons, the investments, the assets backing tens of millions in promises. Here's the problem with that number, one last time. Against millions of dollars owed to tens of thousands of people, investigators found, in actual postal coupons, about $61 worth. $61. The entire empire, the mansion, the bank, the cheering crowds. All of it had been built on a slip of paper worth less than a week's groceries. Ponzi went to prison. He got out, tried it again in Florida with swampland, went back to prison, and was finally deported to Italy in 1934. He died in a charity hospital in Rio de Janeiro in 1949, blind in one eye, partly paralyzed, and broke. His entire estate was about $75, just enough to bury him. The Boston Post, for the reporting that stopped him, won the Pulitzer Prize. You'd think a story that public, that total, would be a vaccine, that no one would ever fall for it again. And that is exactly where this stops being history and starts being a warning that came true. Forget Ponzi the man for a moment. Look only at the machine he built, because the machine is the real villain and the machine never dies. Every Ponzi scheme, from that office on School Street to the ones running right now, obeys one merciless rule. The returns don't come from earnings. They come from new deposits, which means the scheme isn't really promising you a return at all. It's quietly promising that a bigger crowd will show up tomorrow than showed up today. Forever. And that's the trap, hidden in plain sight inside the number. When Ponzi promised to double your money in 90 days, he wasn't describing an investment. He was describing how fast the line outside had to grow. To pay 50% to today's investors, he needs a much larger pile of cash from tomorrow's. To pay them, he needs a larger pile still. The scheme has to grow and keep growing. Geometrically, exponentially, with no ceiling and no rest. But nothing on earth grows forever. Eventually you run out of new people. It might be a bad news story. It might be a recession where too many people want their money at once. It might just be arithmetic finally catching up. But the day new money coming in drops below old money owed out, even for a moment, the whole thing implodes instantly. There is no soft landing. A Ponzi scheme doesn't shrink. It exists, and then it doesn't. That's why the promised return is the tell. Not because high returns are always fraud. They aren't. But because a number that can only be paid by an ever larger crowd isn't a yield. It's a countdown. Ponzi's countdown ran for about 8 months. The next man's would run for decades, because he learned the one lesson Ponzi never did. December 11, 2008. Federal agents arrest a 70-year-old man in his Manhattan apartment. His name is Bernard Madoff, and for years he had been one of the most respected figures on Wall Street, a former chairman of the Nasdaq stock market, a man whose fund was so exclusive that being allowed to invest with him felt like joining a club. There were no postal coupons this time. There were no coupons of any kind. Investors handed Madoff their money believing he was quietly trading it through some brilliant strategy. He wasn't trading anything. The money sat, and old investors were paid with new investors' deposits. The exact engine Ponzi built on School Street, stripped of even the pretense of a real idea behind it. And here is the number, and you know by now to be careful with it. On paper, Madoff's fund claimed to hold around $65 billion. Here's the problem with that number. Most of it never existed. It was fictional profit typed onto statements, describing trades that were never made. The real money, actual savings from actual people, from retirees to charities to entire universities, was gone, paid out to earlier investors, or simply spent in the largest fraud of its kind in history. Ponzi's scheme lasted months and stole millions. Madoff's lasted years, some say decades, and consumed billions, running underneath a real, regulated Wall Street firm, past auditors, past investors, past a stock market regulator that was warned and didn't act. On March 12, 2009, Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal felonies. He was sentenced to 150 years in prison, and he died there in 2021. 88 years separated the immigrant on School Street from the chairman on Wall Street. Different centuries, different money, different men. The exact same machine, because the machine had never needed fixing. It only ever needed a line of people willing to believe that 50% was coming, and that they'd be smart enough to get out first. And it didn't end with Madoff. As recently as 2014, United States regulators shut down a scheme called Telex Free, run out of an office park in Massachusetts, dressed up as an internet phone company, powered by the exact same engine underneath. Same machine, new paint. But that's a story for another day. So here's the pattern that keeps repeating, and it's older than Ponzi, and it will outlive all of us. A Ponzi scheme is not an investment that went wrong. It's not a bet that lost. It is a promise that can only stay alive as long as the line keeps growing, and every line, everywhere, eventually stops. What makes it work is never the math, because the math is always impossible. What makes it work is the number. A number big enough and confident enough that people stop asking where it comes from. 50% in 45 days. A steady, beautiful return, year after year, that never seems to wobble. The next time a number like that walks up and smiles at you, you don't need to know anything about coupons or Wall Street. You only need to ask the one question the crowd on School Street forgot to ask. Not, how much will I make? But who, exactly, is this money coming from? If the honest answer is the next person in line, you already know how the story ends. You've just watched it. If you want the whole, astonishing story of that summer, the crowds, the mansion, the newspaper that made him and then destroyed him, the best account is the book that reads like a thriller and happens to be true. Ponzi Scheme by Mitchell Zukoff. It's the definitive telling, and it's the source I'd start with.